Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving headfirst into this incredibly dense, genuinely mind-bending essay from the Crabtree Library. It's called Actual Magic, Threshold Engine of a New World Singularity. Now, real quick, before you let the word magic throw you off, stick with me here. We are not talking about casting spells or shuffling ancient symbols. Now, this is actually a profound look at finding a practical, internal toolkit to survive our hyper-accelerated modern world. Essentially, we're looking at a survival framework for when literally everything around you stops making sense.
Which brings us directly to the massive central problem of the essay. I want you to really anchor yourself to this question. How do you stay continuous when the world does not persist? We are currently living inside what the author calls a singularity. It's this moment where the sheer overwhelming velocity of technological and cultural shifts is just totally outrunning the machinery we built to make sense of them. So, when the world changes faster than your maps can possibly update, how on earth do you maintain your own internal integrity?
Okay, let's dive into this first major paradigm shift, the permanent threshold, navigating the singularity. So, to figure out how we actually navigate this singularity, we have to look at the collapse of our stable belief systems and demystify a really core concept, liminality. You see, the old world gave us stable interiors, right? Institutions, predictable horizons, slow-moving cultures. But when that stability expires, we enter liminality. And liminality isn't just a door you step through quickly. It's actually the state of being stuck in the doorway itself. It's this intermediate void where you definitely no longer belong to your old identity, but you haven't yet arrived at your new one either. Now, in modern culture, we absolutely hate this unmapped middle state. We demand instant transitions. But the essay points out something fascinating. This dangerous, unlit corridor is actually the most fertile ground there is. It's the exact prerequisite for genuine metamorphosis. To explain this, the essay sets up a really brilliant contrast between two frameworks. Think about Old World religion. That was basically an architectural model built for dry land. It gave you commandments and calendars designed for a world that would sit still and persist. But this essay proposes actual magic as the framework for our current era, and it's built strictly for the crossing. If the old religion was a solid house on dry land, actual magic is the dynamic equilibrium of a sailor in a storm. It doesn't rely on the ground staying still at all. It relies entirely on your internal ability to keep your balance while the deck is violently pitching beneath your feet. That takes us straight to our next section, the mechanics, integrity in the dark. Now, what's really interesting about this is if we are those sailors in a perpetual storm, how exactly do we maintain that internal balance? How do we keep our integrity in the dark when our old symbols and traditional moral compasses just completely fail us? Well, the author uses this fantastic physical metaphor of a plant in winter. When you cut a plant back hard, past the performative flowers, past the visible leaves, you eventually hit that woody perennial base. Now, that isn't death. That's the part that survives every single winter. It's what the author calls the emotional stem. In an era of constant crisis, our narrated, performative emotions just get burned away by sheer exhaustion. And what you're left with is this woody stem, the absolute core of your feeling that survives the deep freeze. And on the far side of that total emotional exhaustion, something incredible happens. Emotion actually becomes function. Feeling stops being this performative story you tell yourself and other people, and it becomes a purified, pre-verbal charge. The grief or the love doesn't disappear, it just stops being a narrative and turns into a raw compass needle. The idea here is that you don't overanalyze this charge. You endure it and you let it steer you right through the singularity without needing to explain it to anyone. Let's look at a genius example the author provides to show how this operates in practice. Thanksgiving. Think about it. You don't need a unified theological doctrine to make Thanksgiving work, right? It functions purely through somatic participation, the physical gathering, the sharing of the bread, the unspoken wish. Rituals like this completely bypass the need for shared beliefs or cerebral tokens. They work simply because physical presence and participation anchor the nervous system, completely independent of what you might actually believe in your head.
Which brings us to a really beautiful conclusion for the mechanics of this framework. Be the wire. In traditional systems, you're constantly manipulating symbols to represent the sacred. But here, the essay argues that you don't actually need to understand the electricity to conduct it. You don't need a mental blueprint of the generator. By simply participating with your whole body, by just being intensely present in the threshold, you act as a wire, conducting meaning and integrity right through your nervous system.
Moving on to our next piece of the puzzle, the architecture, myth, data, and instinct. So having locked down the mechanics, the essay radically shifts gears. It merges primal ancestral myth, directly with modern data architecture to explain how we process the future. And to illustrate this, the source text gives us this grotesque but incredibly vital mythic image, the toad in the cauldron. The toad is a threshold creature. It lives in the mud, speaking in raw, pre-verbal vibrations. And crucially, it's boiling. It is dissolving in the cauldron because true revelation requires the absolute breakdown of your ego's container. You literally can't get the vision and keep your shape. The dissolution is the price. And as it boils, it whispers, once upon a time again to come, basically collapsing the deep past and the unborn future into a single intense moment.
The author actually coins a term for this collapse, mysticis digital. It's the recognition that ancient archetypes, like those you'd find in a tarot deck, and modern information architecture are actually the exact same thing, just seen from two different sides. Tools like the tarot aren't just fortune-telling parlor tricks. They act as an occult operating system. They are a data structure designed specifically to decompress destiny. It's suggesting that destiny is really just data with a soul, running queries directly on human intuition.
And this brilliantly illustrates the underlying unity between the ancient and the modern. Think of it as two expressions of a structural imperative. On one hand, we have myth, which executes in our muscle and memory and nervous system. On the other hand, we have the algorithm, which executes in silicon. Both of them are protective compression formats. Just as an algorithm compresses complex code into an executable file, ancient myths compress terrifying, unborn futures into stories that our nervous systems can safely carry without totally panicking. This realization completely changes how we view learning during a singularity. The essay refers to this as astral academics. In a world that is changing so fast that traditional learning literally cannot keep up, true study is not about acquiring new information. It is education as excavation. It's the act of remembering the ancestral survival scripts that are already preloaded into your DNA. Think about it. Your ancestors survived plagues, wars, massive societal collapses. Their successful adaptations are archived right inside you, just waiting to be unlocked the exact moment you need them. Now we pivot to the final visionary section, the vision. The apocalypse is a wedding. Before we get to the wedding itself, we have to look at this highly provocative quote from the text. The shadow is the baby mama of the real. Now, what the author is asserting here is that all real, creative power and metabolic integrity actually requires darkness. The chaotic, the wicked, the painful parts of existence, our shadow, are the co-parents of anything genuinely transformative. A magic or a worldview that tries to exclude its own darkness is just fundamentally fragile. True integrity requires metabolizing the entire spectrum of reality, shadow included. So if we must accept the shadow, and if the apocalypse is not actually a destruction but a ceremony, it begs a pretty massive question. What exactly is being married to what? It's a question that builds attention for the entire essay's ultimate conclusion about the nature of this singularity we're living through.
Well, the answer is the Great Marriage. This archetypal threshold ceremony unifies forces that were previously at war with each other. It marries the self to its shadow, basically escorting the dark out of the cellar and right up to the head table. It marries the living to the ancestral, collapsing time. It marries the intuitive story to the rigorous system. And most importantly, it marries the old world to the new world at the exact precise seam of the singularity.
The author calls this state wedding party consciousness. The essay is asking us to fundamentally reframe our mindset here. Instead of approaching the end of our old world with apocalyptic terror and dread, we should approach it with the ecstatic, joyful gravity of a nuptial feast. We are not refugees fleeing a burning house. No, we are honored participants stepping into the grand, ecstatic union of whatever comes next. So, the crucial point is the integrity that crosses. We've journeyed through liminality, emotional stems, mythic compression, and wedding parties, but it all comes back to a deeply practical necessity. Actual magic isn't an aesthetic, it's the fundamental integrity you absolutely must maintain to stay coherent while every single external landmark around you dissolves. Which leaves us with this final, memorable challenge drawn directly from the core of the text. Can you remain one while everything you navigate by comes apart? As you step boldly through the doorway of the future, remember that you are the wire, you carry the ancestral code, and the crossing is not a funeral, it's a celebration. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning, and I'll catch you in the next one.